Let me thank you for coming to see us at police headquarters to discuss some issues in relation to the recent spike in gun-related homicides. I think you'll remember that 7 weeks ago I came to the country along with the Commissioner and along with Assistant Commissioner Acting Griffith. And on that occasion we spoke candidly to you all on the crime situation in Barbados. We took, I believe, the country in our confidence. We discussed some of the measures that had been put in place to help to combat the gun violence and the gun-related homicides. Now, in the last few days, we've had 4 shooting deaths in 3 days. We had 2 on Tuesday, 1 on Wednesday, and 1 last night, Thursday. This brings the total number of homicides for the year 2022 to 28. I remind you that in 2021, we ended the year with 32 homicides. We closed out 2020 with 41, and we closed out 2019 with 48. In these circumstances, especially with 4 vicious shootings in a very narrow window, the country is very correctly concerned about this state of affairs. And I therefore feel that it's important that we come back to the country to discuss what for them would be a very burning concern. The first thing I'd like to say is that we must not lose sight of the fact that this is a spike. From practically time immemorial, we have always seen, whether it's in relation to homicides, gun-related crimes, burglaries, whatever it is, we've never seen a consistent level of activity. It dies down, and then periodically it will re-emerge as a spike again. Now, while the nature and extent of this spike could not have been anticipated by anyone, we see no reason to believe that this is the start of an extended, what could be an extended trend. So our first premise is that this is a spike. We've had spikes before. Whenever there's a spike, the Barbados Police Service doubles down, devotes additional resources where necessary, whether manpower or otherwise, and deals with that particular situation. So I think that's an important start-off point. The second thing that I want to home in on is that these shootings are not random shootings. Commissioner Boyce has already spoken to the country and pointed out that this particular spate of instability is being caused by 2 or 3 groups that are engaging in feuding and recriminations. These criminals know and plot for the people who they are targeting, and invariably it is the associates or members of the rival groups. To me, this signals that on a whole, Barbadians remain safe in their homes and in their communities. So I want also to assure Barbadians that we have not descended into any state of anarchy. There's a spike, but these are not random shootings, and I believe that Mr. Griffith, when he speaks, will probably give you a little bit more information about that. So it's important that Barbadians stand assured that they and that Barbados is still a safe place. That being said, as safe as we are as individuals, these killings are undeniably going to threaten our way of life, and they will imperil the future of every Barbadian. And I want to stress this point. While individually we may be safe in Cave Hill, in Horse Hill, in wherever it is that we live, any time that Barbados is seen as being a lawless country with a lot of gunplay, it will serve to make Barbados less attractive, not just to Barbadians who live here, but Barbadians abroad, from our international partners and from our friends. So, as I said, while we may be safe as individuals, what has been happening can serve to have a severe and deleterious effect on Barbados and on our way of life. It is quite possible that as a result of some of this gunplay, people will begin to feel that we are under siege. It will certainly dampen our appetite for venturing out in the day and at night, And already I've heard people begin to say that they don't know if they feel safe. But that just goes to show that even though we begin by saying that they're not random shootings, that we acknowledge, Commissioner, that the effect of this kind of activity across our society can be quite serious. Our country's reputation for peace and safety could be lost, and this will affect each and every one of us as our tourists and our investors seek other shores. This will in turn negatively affect our vendors, our entertainers, our nightlife, and our other recreation. It will affect us all. So this gunplay, and you've heard me say it before, but I say it again, this gunplay must stop. But I also assert that we have it within our power to stop it. I've repeatedly said that this administration has made sure that law and order is the first call on our national resources. What does that mean? It has meant that every single time that the Barbados Police Service has come to government and said, AG, Minister of Finance, Prime Minister, we need this particular resource, we need this particular equipment, we have not balked in providing it. Every single resource that they have asked for, we have tried to put in place. But in addition, we've also taken the trouble to make sure that we've done quite a few initiatives, and we've spoken about them before, so I don't want to repeat them today. But we've done a lot of initiatives to try to safeguard our families and our communities, the Vulnerable Families Program, all of these things we've tried to put together to make sure as an administration that we cover off the basis of protecting our societies. But we have to begin by recognizing that burying our head in the sand is not an option. The first problem with guns is the ease of availability of firearms in our northern neighbor. Firearms and how easily they are obtained in the U.S. is one of the gravest threats to law and order in the U.S. and in the Caribbean. Just watch CNN any given day. This easy access to firearms in that particular market has created a huge problem for us in the Caribbean, as we have seen those guns making their way onto our streets. But it is not something that started yesterday. It didn't start year before. It is something, it's a phenomenon that has been increasing over time, and I have to take you back to the days, regrettably, when our port did not have a working scanner. With those kinds of weaknesses, it allowed a large number of firearms to make their way onto the streets. And firearms are not mangoes or bananas, they don't spoil. They make their way onto the streets and they stay there until they are used, and you can see that they are being used. So there's an international context, and that context is we don't provide guns, but because they're so easily available in the United States, then that is the source market for the large influx of firearms in the Caribbean. The regional context, exactly what you are seeing in Barbados is the phenomenon that we are seeing all across the region, from Jamaica in the north to Trinidad in the south. But if you want to take Jamaica and Trinidad off as the two extremes, not just geographically, but in terms of their population and their history of homicides and gangs and so on, then you can look at our OECS member states. It has become such a huge problem in our OECS member states, St. Lucia and other, St. Vincent, Antigua, St. Kitts, that in these smaller countries, they've had to seek the support of the regional security system to be able to put more boots on the ground to help to keep their countries safe. And I'm not at all about comparing Barbados to any other Caribbean country. I'm not here to say that we are not as bad as this place or we are better than someplace else. But just to underscore that what has been sweeping our nation is not just sweeping our country, it is sweeping our sister countries. Just yesterday in the St. Lucia Press, St. Lucia reported that year to date, so from 1st January 2022 until 1st September 2022, they reported 48 homicides. We've reported 28. They've reported 48. And the size of the St. Lucian population is 2/3 of ours. So a smaller country with more police officers per capita, but they have 48 homicides. So it is not just a Barbados problem. What we're seeing with the huge influx and use of firearms is a regional phenomena that we have to tackle it, and that we have to tackle. And that's why Prime Minister Rowley has said that we have to begin to talk about violence in the region as a health care issue. So please remember that we are not isolated in our current experiences. But I maintain, when I mentioned the absence of a scanner in recent times, that we are simply reaping a whirlwind that was sown when, in that era, no serious measures were taken to deal with the problem in all of its aspects. But be that as it may, I have to ask Barbadians not to expect the impossible. We cannot turn around this insidious problem overnight. There are no overnight solutions. So if there are Barbadians who are thinking that the Barbados Police Service will be able, by snapping its finger, to arrest the kind of violence that we are seeing between groups and so on, it's a fool's errand. It cannot and will not be overturned, will not be turned around overnight. It will require steady, diligent work on the part of the police service, on the part of the government, and equally important, on the part of the people of Barbados. But I want to say that the Barbados Police Service has been scoring major successes in firearm seizures at rates never before seen in Barbados. And perhaps the Commissioner will share some of those seizures with you. It isn't every time that they do a seizure that it gets emblazoned on the front of a newspaper. But the police are seizing more firearms than they have ever done in the history of Barbados. So we've taken efforts to make sure and cut down on the number of firearms that are coming in. So we've been working on reducing that. We're dealing with that in the port, we're dealing with it in the airport, we're dealing with it in the post office. Wherever we know firearms coming, we've heightened our measures to tamp that down, to reduce it as much as possible. And we're also removing firearms off of the streets at a rate that I think the members of the police service need to be congratulated for. But that's only part of the solution. The police service is not made up, and I'll speak frankly, the police service is not made up of a set of officers who have some special power to know when and where a shooting will occur. And sometimes Barbadians speak of the nature of policing as though these fine gentlemen have some clairvoyant ability to know that something is going to happen in Castle or know something's going to happen somewhere else. I wish that they had that ability, but Commissioner, we don't. This is not TV land. Police operate based on intelligence. And intelligence comes from investigations, and intelligence comes from Barbadians who are willing and able to come forward and support us by saying what they know. And perhaps you don't hear it often enough, but it's important that we say, if you see something, you have to say something. And every Barbadian has a role to play in this. If you don't feel that you want to reach out to the police directly, and I understand that some of you may be a little uncomfortable, I encourage you to call Crime Stoppers. Crime Stoppers number is 1-800-8477, 1-800-8477. And Crime Stoppers, as a reputable international agency, has been working tremendously with the Barbados Police Service, and on many occasions the tips that come through that particular avenue have been pivotal in solving crime. But however you do it, the success of the police service will depend on large measure on each of us playing our part. Now, I believe that every right-thinking Bajan wants the shootings to stop and wants the guns off of the streets. But you can't have it both ways. You can't want a successful outcome from the side of the police service, but still feel that you don't have a role to play. We know that we were successful in COVID because we adopted a whole of country approach. Every Barbadian had a role to play in it. And that's exactly how we have to deal with the crime situation. I think that the statistics in relation to the other crimes are down. So if we've been able to quell the other kinds of criminal activity using particular interventions and methods, there's no reason why we should not be able to succeed in firearm crimes by using the same approach. But we cannot have the police service out there working night and day to keep us safe, and others of us feel that they don't have to contribute to this exercise. Every Bajan has skin in this game. And while we may not be able to get the guns off the streets overnight, while we may not be able to reverse some of the negative things that have happened over time, overnight, the one thing that I feel, and the one thing this government feels we can begin in terms of an immediate response, is zero tolerance for guns. What does that mean? If your son, and I'm speaking to the public who really wishes was life, if your son or your daughter or your boyfriend or your girlfriend is involved in that way of life, bringing guns in the house, hiding them under the mattress, tell them not with you. Not with you. And if you doubted that you are at risk by accepting and supporting that way of life, look at the video that is currently being circulated of that lady who was run down by a gun-wielding individual and shot several times. Now, that's all I'm going to say. If you, your partner, your mother, your father, your brother, your sister, whoever it is involved in that way of life, zero tolerance means that we have a vested interest in telling them to get rid of it, get out of that way of life. The Barbados Police Service does not have a reach into people's homes except with a warrant. Except with a warrant. Now, I understand this is a difficult conversation. It will be hard for some, because some of the members of the public may rely on these individuals for support. They may say, well, I can't do this to my child father, and so on and so on. But the fact is that if you don't, you have to accept that you may well become a casualty because you support that particular way of life. At a policy level, we are continuing our efforts to ensure that the service has every resource that it requires in this fight. Earlier this week, I met with the commissioner and several of his senior officers, and by early this week, I know before the spurt, before the spike. This is not something that we just start. We continued our discussion on how can we make sure that the police service is even better equipped than it currently is. I want to make sure that the Barbados Police Service is the best equipped police service in the region. We have fine police officers, and we must make sure that they have the best, that they have our support in terms of the best things to work with. So we're working on that. And there are a number of other parts that are connected to the system. You've been reading and in fact publishing, no doubt, that there have been issues with case files and so on, and you know, there are challenges. There is a serious backlog in our criminal courts. And while we've appointed additional judges, you know, you've heard me say it ad nauseum, we've appointed 5 judges to the criminal bench, it is clear that cases are still not being moved through the system as fast as we would like. We have to be realistic, though. 2 judges dealing with over 1,000 cases, that's what we had. We now have 5 judges dealing with over 1,000 cases. Those numbers are better. The ratio is better, but it is still a challenge. Remember, too, that even though we've told, as a matter of policy, we directed the Director of Public Prosecutions to emphasize or to fast-track all the murder cases and all the serious firearm offenses, we've had much of the last 2 years lost because of COVID. All of those offenses require jury trials, but because of the physical distancing requirements and so on, it made it impossible for much of the time to actually conduct jury trials. And as an aside, I'd like to actually thank the members of the criminal bench, because despite the challenges of COVID, they were able to get rid of 200 criminal cases in 2020 and over 200 in 2021. That is a far cry from what it used to be. But even with all that, we recognize that there are still some challenges when it comes to getting files through the system. And just last week, a combined team of interested parties, including the police, the DPP, and others, we had a closed-door meeting for the whole day to examine this problem and to look at solutions and to further agree to adopt a series of measures to ensure that case files relating to those special areas, murders and firearms, move through the system swiftly. And I'm looking forward to seeing those operational initiatives being implemented. The priority of our criminal system has to be murder cases and firearms. I think I've spoken for a bit longer than I had planned to. Let me just repeat. Every Bajan has skin in this game. It is not good enough for us to believe that these kinds of things only happen in Eagle Hall because some places down there is a bad area. Barbados is too small for those kinds of geographical distinctions. A person who is intent on committing a crime will as easily do it in Eagle Hall as he will in Bathsheba or in Concept Bay or in Long Bay or anywhere in Barbados. Every place in Barbados is within easy reach. So none of our communities are going to be immune from it. So we all have skin in the game. Largely, Barbadians are able to go to sleep, they're able to do their business because these are random shootings. They are random shootings. But we can't operate on the basis of us and them. We are all in this together. Every Barbadian has to play a part, and we require each of you adopt a zero tolerance attitude. Zero tolerance for anybody dealing with firearms. Don't like the videos on social media if it comes to that. Zero tolerance. And then finally, please, 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 you have a role to play. Support the work of the police. They work night and day tirelessly. Make every sacrifice. And if they can do that on their part, every Barbadian who knows something can come forward and support the effort by letting us know in a confidential manner. Commissioner?
Right, good evening, everyone. The Honorable Attorney General was very wide and complete in his delivery. In fact, I ticked off the things I had here, which even though we did not combine in the same room and discuss, I noticed that he touched on a number of matters which I had here to deal with. Nevertheless, there are one or two things that I would like to also highlight. And first, the aspect of prevention, that we have to put some resources in, and that is working with our international stakeholders and having this situation brought under control. Now, yes, the American Firearm and Tobacco arm of the U.S., they are working intimately, consistently, and long-term with us in wrestling this problem of firearms to the ground. And it is an ongoing basis, a daily basis, that we will correspond, share our ideas, and zero in on what is happening. And it is working very well. And I would probably turn your mind back to when that operation occurred in Bridgetown Port. They came on board. And I'm happy to report that things are moving in the right direction where that is concerned. So that is a preventative measure that we have put in place and which is bearing fruits. In addition to the overseas activity, what has been discovered is that family members of persons who reside in the island are getting on board now and facilitating the movement of firearms from one jurisdiction to our jurisdiction. And that is some concern to us. So that is something that must be called out, something that must be highlighted, and action taken against. Because once we identify those persons, then our partners would work with us, and we will bring that situation under control. Another aspect which we will have to look at is how we, as a police service, utilize our resources in dealing with the whole question of firearms. And we have pulled various units together. The SCAPS unit, the TRU, that is another unit that we pulled together, and other emergency response units, 3 units that are working on a consistent and assiduous basis in addressing this whole question of firearms interventions. And I must say that on a daily basis, we are recovering firearms. Currently, we are at 65 firearms in recovery, and 75 firearms in recovery. And when we compare that to just 30 odd for last year, 36 or so, we find that that is a tremendous divide between last year's recovery and this year's recovery. So our inputs, our tactics are working in terms of recovery of firearms. And that is something that is ongoing, and we intend to continue that for a very, very long time. Now, in terms of persons who are getting engaged in this firearms issue, what we discover is that there are persons who are well known to each other, persons who would have gone to school together, persons who, as we would say, pitch marbles together, travel on school buses together. So these are the persons now who are against each other's throat. And the thing for them is to acquire a firearm, acquire that level of manliness. That is, one become a manhood very early. It gives them a sense, that courage, if you want to term it that, to get out there and do things with a firearm. And that is something that we have to really, really zero in on. What we've noticed also is that persons bringing home firearms from fetes, going to sleep, leaving the firearms, whether it's the living room, the dining room, wherever, because they come home tired and dressing themselves, putting down the firearms. Parents, brothers and sisters, others are seeing these firearms and tidying up the house, sweeping and things like that, and dare not touch those firearms because persons within the dwelling houses are living in fear. So people in various communities, that is the adults, must have the courage to tell the siblings, the children, whoever they are in the house, not in here, not in here, not roaming. So those are messages that persons can put in place, because if every household have some person who can speak that type of language, then the persons who are coming up within those household will get the message and do not handle firearms. Yes, we are well aware that firearms is a trade commodity. Persons are very much involved in the whole trading of firearms. So whether it is lending, whether it is selling and buying, there's a market for them. So that we have to dismantle that market. So as the Honorable AG said, it is not a matter for the police service alone. It is for every law-abiding citizen within this country. So we are calling on persons to come on board with us, partner with us, and make sure that we get this situation under control. Now, the police service meets on a regular basis with the persons who work at our respective ports of entry. And we share that information so that every person will be on board how things are operating. So we should see a lot more vigilance being paid to our ports of entry and a lot more interdiction at the ports of entry. And that is one way that we can measure our successes as we go forward. So having tremendous knowledge of where these arms are coming from, who are facilitating these weapons through our ports of entry, that is something that we would address going forward in a big and profound way. So I can assure you all that the police service are well on board. The police service is well girded to make those types of intervention whereby we have these weapons out of the hands of those persons who are very, very, very intent on disturbing our peace and tranquility in the various districts. And I must say that we cannot take it for granted that there's only violence against persons who have similar mindset, that is criminal intent, and lawlessness or whatever. There's the possibility that persons, innocent Mary, James, or John, can be injured, and that is of tremendous concern to us. So it is protecting each and every person in the society. And the protection reach out also to persons who are involved in criminal activity. You might not know, but I must say that persons who have been identified as targets, we too expend tremendous resources in protecting those persons. We take those persons into safe custody and keep them safely until things die down. And if we were not doing that, mind you, our murder rate would be skyrocketing. It will be, but we have a heart that we see them as all brothers and sisters, and we put the resources to protect them. Some person might say, my wife protect a bad boy. We don't see it that way. We embrace them, we nurture them, we protect them. So those are things that we are doing and we will continue to do. And once we as a police unit keep at it, police service keep at it, I can assure each and every person in Barbados that we will see the tremendous benefits out there in the not too distant future. So those are things that I will speak to. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Honorable Attorney General. Thank you, Commissioner. Now, with the one charged with the responsibility of managing crime in this country, I just want to put some things into context. Now, so far for this year, 2022, we have recorded 28 murders. But of those 28 murders, 21 of them were as a result of the use of firearms. Now, that figure is extremely high, and we are extremely concerned about it. Now, but when we examine these 21 murder cases, 14 of those deceased persons were on bail for various serious offenses, including murder, use of firearm, possession of firearm, serious bodily harm by the use of firearm, and such like. And when we look at that against what we have, 5 stabbings, 1 strangled, and 1 person beaten. Now, we cannot underscore the use of firearms in these related murders. And when we look at it in relation to those persons who were on bail, one can see from our investigations that these persons are affiliated with certain groups in Barbados. And it is no secret that these groups are warring against each other. We see it daily. There are persons out there who know of these warring factions. And what we would ask Barbadians to do is, if they see something, the Commissioner has said it this afternoon, the Attorney General has said it. We always say in Barbados, wherever there is a happening, it is witnessed by someone. There's never anything that happens in Barbados that someone do not see. And all we are asking the public, which we police, to do is to join with us and share that information. These persons who are warring against each other, like I said, some of them were on bail for things like murder. In one particular case, there was a man on bail for 3 murders. And one would expect that along the way he would have created several enemies. And given the climate that exists amongst those persons, that anything can happen at any time. And that brings into sharp focus the work that the Barbados Police Service is doing in order to turn around this situation. Our men and women are on the job day and night, and I want to assure the public that we will be relentless in our pursuits against these persons. And I want to assure Barbadians that they can go about their business. Because like I said, in putting these murders into context, 5 stabbings, 1 person strangled, 1 beaten. And from our investigations, it is very clear to us that the majority of these murders are committed by persons affiliated with those groups, and they're exacting their own vengeance and therefore putting Barbadians in fear. But I want to assure Barbadians that it is more or less confined with that particular group, with the 21 gun-related murders amongst that group. So again, I would want to assure Barbadians that they can go about their business and that they have the confidence that the Barbados Police Service is out there doing all to protect their interests. The Commissioner mentioned it, the Attorney General mentioned it, the amount of firearms that we have been seizing in recent times. And with those seizures, it shows that the service is out there and they're manfully committed to the task of trying to rid the streets of those firearms. Yes, there is much to do, and we can only do it in partnership with the public in which we police. And again, I will call on the public to continue to support the police. Who have information to pass, we would welcome it, and there are ways to pass it. The Honorable Attorney General mentioned Crime Stoppers. And I will assure you that any information given will be treated in the strictest confidence. Any police officer can be approached and given information. They're trained as to how to handle that information to protect the interests of those who give information. So there's no need to worry about the information getting into the wrong hands and not being treated properly. And I would hasten to add that of the 28 murders we have, 15 of those 28 murders have been solved. And again, that shows the work that the Barbados Police Service is doing in trying to make Barbados a safe place. And I would want to, at this point in time, publicly commend those officers from those particular units that the Commissioner mentioned for their resolve, for their commitment, and for the work that they're doing in trying to rid the streets of these firearms, in association with our international partners and the public. So basically, that is what I would want to say to you this afternoon. And of course, if there are any questions.
ACP Griffith, from your investigations, are they drug related or men looking for turf? Because that is also a question being asked, if it's drugs, or and there's a saying that there are no gangs in Barbados. How true is this?
That it is a combination, but more so leaning towards gang or group activity. The Attorney General just mentioned it, and when you look at the very last 4 murders, now those 4 murders, the very last 4 murders, that is, those persons from our investigations were affiliated with particular groups. And there is a particular man in that group of the last 4 that was under investigation for some very serious murders. Some murders committed with the use of firearms. And according to our investigation, he was a person heavily involved in drugs as well. So towards that end, I would say that it is a combination, but more leaning towards those groups that we are targeting. Our investigations, we are keeping a very close eye on them. We are doing some investigations that in the fullness of time, we expect to see certain results. But again, that will take time. It will not happen overnight. We need the public, which we police, to give us that information that would assist us in really targeting those groups and bringing them before the court. We are extremely concerned that with the use of firearms, that persons standing around innocent bystanders sometimes may become victims of some of those shootings, and that is what we want to guard against. So again, it will call on the public to give us that information so that we can continue to pursue those groups.
These new groups, are these groups that have been in existence for many years? We know the old ones, but you don't hear the names anymore. But are these new groups? And if they're new groups, can you share with us like where some of these hot spots are emerging, and if these are also new recruits, so to speak, or people who have been involved in crime for a while?
I would not say that they're new. What I would say is that they have found a way to have firearms in their possession, and like the Attorney General said, we do not have magic wands. And in amongst those groups, when things happen, they try to exact their own revenge. And as a consequence, they will do things that sometimes we would not know about. And again, this is where members of the public can assist us. When they see things, say something, so that we would know what is happening in various communities across Barbados. We know where some of those misguided youth operate from, but as we have seen that they move around the entire length and breadth of Barbados and commit their acts where they see persons that they believe that they're in opposition with. So I don't want to say that it is a set of new persons. That is not the indication, but it is things happening amongst those persons that were in existence for a long time.
Hi, good afternoon. Randy Bennett from Barbados today here. This question is for Mr. Griffith. All right, we've seen 4 murders in the space of 2 days. My question, obviously these pair of shootings started, if I recall, these pair of shootings started with the shooting in St. Joseph. Then obviously there was the shooting by the Screw Dogs, and obviously the 2 bodies were found at Long Bay. My question is if these recent shootings, if the Barbados Police Service, if you all have the investigations that they're related in terms of from the murder in St. Joseph, the Screw Dogs, and obviously Long Bay as well.
Right. Whenever there's a murder investigation and we commence our investigations, there is always a lot to be done. And some of the things we look at are linkages, whether it is a linkage by way of firearm, whether it's a linkage by association of persons and such like. And you must appreciate that some of these are very recent. So I don't want to come here and say that they are all connected or not connected. We have to give the investigation time, and we would know once the investigation takes place. Our investigators, like I said earlier, are some highly trained individuals. They're very committed, and I am confident that our investigations will show us whatever there is for us to know in those investigations.
My final question to the AG. I know you spoke about the backlog, but recently 2 High Court judges suggested that in one instance, one High Court judge suggested a 3-month timeline between persons being charged and the case making its way to the High Court. Another judge suggested 6 months. I was wondering if you believe that those are practical timelines that the police force could be able to wrap up the investigations or be able to present in that timeline.
I like to think that the respected judges try to come up with normative timeline. Somebody might ask them if a High Court case can get finished in 3 months. And I suspect that they might have a little bit of difficulty trying to do that. One of the challenges that you face, let's be practical. We have a very small criminal bar, okay? There are a few specific lawyers, and you know them as well as I do, who specialize and who are more sought after in criminal cases. There are very important criminal cases that cannot be heard simply because those lawyers are already involved in other cases that are either pending or scheduled. Okay? I don't want to call anybody's name, but there's a murder case that for me is of vital importance in Barbados, but because of the unavailability of the lawyer time and time again, it gets moved on. I respect the judges and I respect their views, but to sit in a court and try to set out what a guideline is, I mean, Mr. Griffith has just said that investigations take long. Now, I'm not a police officer, but I can parallel. The commissioners briefed me that there are times when they will bring charges against an individual on the basis of evidence that they have. But the fact that they may have charged you does not mean that the investigation is yet at an end, because there are multiple things that are investigated, and these days when we're now looking into what they do with the assets and money laundering and so on, it takes quite some time longer. So DNA testing and so on, that we nowadays we have to send overseas. So it is nice to be able to say, I think that a 3-month guideline is adequate, or I think a 6-month guideline is adequate. That is very hypothetical. I prefer to think of what is practical. And there are some challenges that we face. I would love to see the day when an investigation is completed, especially a murder investigation. I'd love to see it completed in 6 months. And that the trial start at the start of the 7th month. That's what we aim for. But I thank the judges for their recommendations, and judges are very wise people.
Attorney General, since the equipment went into operation at the port, have you seen a reduction, or has there been any success, or successes where it's concerned with catching any?
Let me tell you, we've so publicized that we were buying equipment that I think that if a fellow's still trying a thing, let me just say that we talk about equipment, but let me assure you, equipment is not the only initiative that is involved here. Equipment is a piece, is hardware. Happily, we have it now. It has been helping, but I believe that what we've seen is that the criminal element has begun to change in some respects how they operate. I can tell you that we are now finding that they are bringing in bullets in bars of soap. Okay, now a piece of equipment that is designed for a container to go through is not likely to be able to pick up a bullet in a bar of soap. So we're having to use other methods, and I say we, but you know what I mean. Having to use other methods to make sure that we discover and seize the firearms and the ammunition and so on. I think though that the measures that we have put into place, equipment and others, have been yielding fruit.